Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of PEPTalk, Productive Environment Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about how to clear the clutter and seize the opportunities. I am Andrea Anderson, CEO of Productive Environment Institute here in Carolina Beach, North Carolina.
And I'm
sorry. Joined by
Barbara Hemphill, founder of Productive Environment Institute, and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. Sorry, I got so anxious, excited about being here. I jumped in.
I know. Hey, never apologize for that. Never apologize for that. Okay. Guys, as you know, if those of you that are part of our channel and part of our community, you know we talk about clutter a lot. And if you're new to our channel, welcome. And we're going to assume that if you're new, that you're here because of some kind of issue with clutter in your life, right? And so we like to share. Barbara's been in the organizing and productivity industry for 46 years. I was going to say nearly 50 years, but I can't. That's just like, oh my God, I can't believe it's that long. 46 years. So she has seen tons and tons of clutter in her lifetime, as have I and our team of certified productive environment specialists. And a lot of times, Barbara, we talk about the fact that sometimes people don't understand the cost of clutter. How much is clutter costing us? And one of those things, or one of those concepts of the cost of clutter, is the missed opportunities. We may not realize that clutter is costing us opportunities. So we want to just have a discussion about that. Do you want to add anything to that before I share a couple of points?
No, I think that is so true that we have become so inundated with clutter that we don't realize the impact it's having on us. And it's not until it's gone. And I've used the example when I first started in the industry doing residential, which of course we don't do now except for home offices. But I would have people call me because they were getting ready to move and they had and sell their house. And so then they had to clear the clutter in order to sell their house. And then after we clear the clutter, they say, oh, if I was known it was this good, I wouldn't have sold it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times that happened.
Yeah, that's true. I see that on HGTV. Are any of you guys HGTV watchers out there? I haven't watched it in a long time, but that was one of my favorite things to just have on in the background. And people would do the Love It or Lose It show, where one person was the realtor that would take them to find a new home, and the other person was that would deconstruct their home and make it the way they would want it. And then they would come back and be like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. This is how I would have wanted it the whole time. So yeah, and then just not taking the time or knowing where to start or what to do. You wait until it's time to move, and then you're like, wow, I really did love my home and I wish I could stay now. So I think that was certainly a lost opportunity. So a couple of points we'll go over, and then we've got some things, just some real life stories to share with you about this. And I invite you to share in the comments if you have experienced missing an opportunity of some kind due to clutter or disorganization, or missing an email or something where you missed an opportunity. Or on the other hand, if you were able to take advantage of an opportunity because you took the time to declutter. I know we have a lot of people that will watch this that are already clients, are already working through things, and they've been able to take advantage of things that they wouldn't have had they not started working on clearing their clutter and putting systems in place. So the first point is time won't wait. Opportunities can disappear, right? So clutter causes delay in responding to emails, following up on leads, or accessing important information. The longer it takes to find what you need, the greater the risk of missing deadlines, potential clients, or life-changing connections, truly. And you heard the word there. Did you guys hear that? Let me emphasize it. The longer it takes to find what you need. We are all about creating a finding system, not necessarily just a filing system, but a finding system. Okay, that's number one. Time won't wait. Opportunities can disappear. If this is ringing any bells for you guys, put it in the comments. Number two, mental clarity leads to better decision making. Okay, a cluttered environment creates mental overwhelm, making it harder to focus and prioritize. When your space is clear, Your mind is free to recognize and seize opportunities with confidence and efficiency. And I can tell you that when I'm working on a project and I've got tons and stuff, tons of things out, because I'm working on that project, when it's time to switch gears to something else, it's very difficult unless I take the time to put that stuff back together. And Barbara, you call that, I think that's like recovering quickly. Like, can you recover quickly?
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like if you have a good system where things, so that the saying "a place for everything and everything in its place" is half right. There has to be a place for everything, but everything's not always going to be in its place. But as long as it has a place, then you can recover quickly.
Yep. Yep. I love that. And I have to remind myself of that because sometimes I'll sit down to work on something different and I just can't focus. I just can't get into it. And then I look around and I go, oh, okay, let me clear the decks and regroup. And that's where we, just kind of put everything back in the place that it belongs when you're switching gears. So
And I
that is
think
something. Oh, go ahead.
people have been teased about that, like people have been made fun of where they needed to clear their desk, like, oh, that's just procrastination, you're doing that because you don't want. And sometimes it is. I mean, that's true. So
Yeah,
you really have to analyze whether you are clearing the clutter in order to procrastinate on doing what you really need to be
that's
doing,
a good
or
point.
is it something you really need to do? And it can be either way, but
Yeah.
progress starts with the truth, so you need to face your truth.
That's right. That's right. So if you're having trouble switching tasks, that's something we've been talking about in our SOAR program, just task inertia, getting hyper focused on one thing and leaving everything else behind. That's one thing that happens is we have everything out, and then it makes it even harder to switch between tasks and between projects. So, all right, number 3, small problems become big problems over time. So back to thinking about lost opportunities, right? Small problems become big problems over time. Procrastinating on decluttering can lead to critical items getting buried, forgotten bills turned into late fees, or overlooked tasks becoming urgent crises. So taking action now prevents stress, financial loss, and unnecessary setbacks in both your personal and your professional life. So all of those have to do with missed opportunities, or again, for those that have, worked on clearing their clutter and putting systems in place, being able to take advantage of opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. So, Barbara, I'll let you take it from there and share your thoughts.
Well, one of the things I want to say first is I think it is so important to recognize that the first step that is absolutely critical is to stop the clutter problem. Whereas most people do exactly the opposite. There's like, okay, finally, this clutter just gotten to be too much, and I'm going to take some time off and I'm going to clear the clutter. And they deal with all the old stuff, whether it's old files, old emails, old whatever it is. But while you're dealing with that, the new is coming in. And so then when you've stopped, it's like, oh, this is hopeless. This is hopeless. Well, it's not hopeless if you ignore the old. And keep in mind, and we've proven this over and over again, that at least 80% of what you keep, we never use. I mean, my favorite way of describing that once was years ago in a large association in Washington, D.C. I put files together and I knew they weren't really going to use them, but they wouldn't throw them away. So I put dollar bills in them and went back 6 months later and all the dollar bills were there. So it proved my point. Nobody looked at it. So number one is to stop the problem. And that's what we do in all of our programs. But I have 2 very dramatic stories of someone who did clear the clutter and somebody who didn't and took advantage of it. So the first person is a college professor who called me and said that she wanted some help with her filing system. And so I went to her office and I spent 8 hours with her stopping the problem. We weren't going through all the old stacks or anything like that. We were figuring out what we now call the finding system and teaching her the magic 6 and the way we deal with paper so that when I left at the end of 8 hours, she knew what to do with every new piece of paper. And at that point, we were dealing with just paper, not digital, but the same principles. We now do this digital as well, but in her case, it was paper. So at the end of that 8 hours, she knew what to do with every new piece of paper that came in. It had a place. There was a place for everything. Secondly, she could find anything we had filed because we did a finding system, not a filing system. And 3, I left her with what we call a productive environment game plan, which is what she needed to do in order to deal with the rest of it. 23 years later, she called me, and she was fascinating. She was a science teacher, college science teacher, and she also had a podcast on a cooking podcast. Very exciting, lot of community activists, lots of interesting things. She called 23 years later, and she said, "I've used your system the whole time. I'm getting ready to retire from college, and some of my files need to go to stay here with the college. Some need to go home to me, and some need to go to my daughter, who I'm transitioning to manage my estate for end of life planning. Can you come and help me figure out how to do that?" I went to her office and I spent 4 hours. And in 4 hours, we had everything switched so that everybody knew exactly what they needed. And we got it all done in 4 hours. So contrast this with another case of where I received a call from a college president. This has been 30 years ago. And the college president said, "I'm getting ready to retire. And I just have all these files, and some of them need to stay with the college, and some of them need to be left for my successor. Some need to be stayed with the college for archival purposes. Some need to be left with my successor. Some need to go home with me. And I am just completely overwhelmed. I don't know where to start." So I flew down there and walked in, and I said, "Please take me on a tour of the office." And I mentioned to her something I learned very early, that back in the early days, we had basically 3 silos of information for an individual. There was an individual that would have their paper that they kept in their space. And then there was the information that was kept like in the department area. And then there was the information that was kept in the archives or wherever. And in the original days, our business has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions. And when I first started this 4 decades ago, there was a decision-making mechanism in place. And that was that every executive had a private secretary. Every department had a file clerk. And every company had a records manager, and there were records management guidelines. And so the decision was, when the executive was done with the paper, it went to the secretary, who sorted it, purged it, put it in the department where it was managed there for 3 years. And then in 3 years, she walked down. I was called her Mabel. Records manager was Mabel, and she had the records retention for the whole company. It got stored there for a while, and then it got either sent offsite, if it had to be permanent storage, offsite to Iron Mountain or someplace like that. In a classic case of what happens so often, the pendulum swung too far, because there were employees when I was there who really didn't have enough work to do. And so then it's like, okay, we're going to digital. We're not going to need all those people. And so they fired people. And now we see it all the time. We have executives who have no assistant. And they don't have time to make the decision about it, and it just piles up. So in the case of the college president, she stopped me in the middle of that story. And she said, "Oh, come and look at this." And we walked down the hall, and here was a big room. It was probably, 8 by 10. She said, much bigger than that. I don't know if it's big, but it had a lot of desks in it. She said, "This used to have desks in it. Now it was full of file cabinets." Because they didn't have the room for the desks anymore. They filled it with file cabinets. And then we walked down the hall, and the hall was lined with 3-drawer lateral filing cabinets that was all mixed up with everybody's stuff. So in order for her to leave now, it will impact several people, all the people in the department, because everybody's going to have to look at, okay, what does the college need to keep from a legal standpoint? What is your successor going to need? What are your personal things? And how much of your personal things are you really going to want to take home? So what took the original college professor 4 hours to figure out how to do, in this case with the college president, it was more like, and I'm not exaggerating, 4 weeks, and involved many, many people. So there were lots of missed opportunities in that case, and the cost of that procrastination about dealing it was huge.
Yeah, and that's where you always say what you say, that when people ask you, when you talk about what you do and what we as a company do, and they say, well, how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take? And what's your response?
I really can't tell you, because part of it depends on how quickly you make decisions. You know, if you're somebody who's going to pick up every piece of paper and agonize over it, it's going to take a long time. But if you can make decisions quickly. So I really don't know that. But what I can tell you for absolute sure is the longer you wait, the longer it will take in time and missed opportunities.
That's right.
So it's kind of pay me now or pay me later.
That's right. The longer you wait, the longer it will take and the more it will cost, for sure, in those opportunities. And along the way, you know, the missed opportunities, and a lot of missed opportunities we don't even know about because we're missing.
And to say nothing about the quality of life that you've missed, because people, I think one of the biggest challenges, one of the gifts that we got from COVID was that people were forced, in many cases, to look at their clutter. I mean, they had to come home, and they brought more offices home and all of that. And then when companies began to downsize and they did hybrid working, and some of the information had to be at home and some at the office. And then in some cases, the companies are saying, hey, we don't need to spend all this money on real estate. So they moved the employees out. And what was left? All the clutter. The clutter was there before. It was just that nobody noticed it. And just like the example we gave in the beginning about the house, it's like, oh, if I'd have known the house was going to look this nice, I would have kept it.
Yeah.
Well, it was like after all the employees left, and then here's all this clutter left behind. Well, it was there before. And even though people weren't aware of it, it was impacting them. We just don't think about it. I think of one blatant example. Again, it's a home example, but actually, I have the same situation with a law firm where there was stuff on a second floor, and it just is up there. Oh, we've got that space. It doesn't really matter. And we cleared it out. And then when we did, both clients, one was home and one was office, oh, this feels so much lighter. Well, if you've ever studied feng shui, you know that if that's literally over your head, that weight is literally over your head. And in both cases of the home and the office, that was the case. And they didn't realize it then. I remember the first client in home said, this sounds crazy, but I sleep better at night. I said, no, it doesn't sound crazy at all, because that weight was literally hanging over your head in your brain, because we know that someday we're going to have to deal with that. So every day it's like, oh, I really should deal with that.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And you just made me think of another example too. We were talking earlier about one of our former consultants that was in our program. She was a productivity expert, and the name of her business was HFD Productivity. And you're just like, oh, okay, HFD product must be initials or something, and for her name or whatever. And when I found out what it actually stood for, and the reason, it was home for dinner productivity. Because her father, as she was growing up with multiple siblings, was never home for dinner because he stayed at the office late working, and he had lots of clutter, and he would go in on the weekends and straighten up to get ready for the next week. And so that made such an impact on her as a child that she grew up and made this her life's work, to help people be able to get home for dinner. So if you guys are working late and putting in those extra hours, I want to remind you of our tagline: accomplish your work and enjoy your life, right?
I have a PS for that story too. She's now retired from her productivity business, but she's very active in the community. And every time she goes and works with some local agency, what do you suppose she ends up doing?
Organizing them.
Organizing it. everybody knows that that's what she does, is that she's done that with food kitchens and pregnancy centers and places like that. She's always the one. So all of that stuff that she did. So she's literally impacting thousands of lives because, and I say this to leaders all the time. I often say great leaders create great cultures. And we all lead somebody. We don't think we do, but we do. We lead our family. I mean, our family watches what we do. We lead in the community and whatever. And so often I've seen it through the years where in fact, my mother's boss, my mother worked for the president. I've forgotten this story till just now, worked 46 years for the president of a bank. And he was a horrible pack rat. And he had his whole big executive office. And then it started moving over into like the boardroom. And people used to come into my mother and say, doesn't your boss know what your daughter does? But here's the weird, strange thing was he required every employee to leave the office at night with a clean desk. But he didn't tell them, there wasn't a system for them to do it. So what they would do is open the drawers and stuff everything in the drawers. And then it would take them maybe 10, 15 minutes to regroup in the morning because they didn't have a system. So it goes back to what we talked about earlier, a place for everything and everything in its place. If you have a place, then they could have cleared it off in 5 minutes and gotten it out in 5 minutes or even less. Yeah. But as it was, and it made him look bad. And it made his employees resent it because it's like, you're making us clean up, but look at what you're doing. So we really do lead other people in the way we organize.
That's right. That's right. So I want to share some things. You might be listening. Some of you might be listening and thinking, well, it's too simple. You guys make it sound so simplistic. Just clear the clutter. We're not saying that at all. We know it's not easy, and it does take systems. So one of the things we'll share, we have a program called SOAR, which stands for Systemize and Organize with Action and Reference. So we try to break it down with Barbara's teachings over the years to make it as simple as possible. So what you can start, when Barbara said earlier, stop the problem, right? Stop the problem, because right now information is coming at us from all different directions and it's piling up in our inbox, in our computers, in our drives, and on our desk, and on our kitchen table, dining room table, and around your house, right? Some of you, not everybody, but some people definitely experience it. We all experience some of that. So we want to teach you how to systemize the capture of the information, okay? And then organize that information, organize the information you capture. And the first step to doing that, I do not want to make this sound like it's just so simple, but there is a first step to that. We call it the first sort, is to divide it into either action, which are projects, tasks, appointments, anything that you need to do or take action on, and reference, anything to save for future reference, right? And then we actually take it a step further to help you find what you saved. But those are the keys. And the third thing, when I said there's 3 decisions that you need to make, and it's whether you file something, act on it, or toss it. So the file, act, toss system is the first sort. And so in that, or whether it's an action, something to do, or something to save for future reference, that is where we start. So if you want to take something from this call right now and actually take action on it, look around where you're listening to this, unless you're in your car, and you see piles that are sitting on your table or your counter or your desk. Grab a pile, maybe this big or whatever, and then just say file, act, toss, and make yourself 3 piles and say, do I need to file this for future reference? Do I need to act on this in some way? Don't try to go act on it now. Just go through the pile and make the file pile, your act pile, and then your toss, recycle, or shred is the third thing. What were you going to say, Barbara?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things we've got just a few minutes left, and I think it's really important that we share that in our experience, the number one stumbling block to clearing the clutter is our emotion. It is so I wrote Less Clutter, More Life, and the premise was that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. and over, hundreds of times in 4 decades, I've talked to people who struggled with letting go or even struggled making decisions about, is this an act or a file? It's like, oh, I want to do this. And one of the myths, really big critical myths, is that if you just got organized, you would be able to do everything, keep everything, have everything. And that is a lie. But the reason it's hard, we say clutter is postponed decisions. And unfortunately, when people quote us, they often say clutter is simply postponed decisions or merely postponed decisions or only postponed decisions. And when you do that, it's like, why am I having so much trouble? And the reason is there is something in your background that caused you to feel this emptiness and needing to hold up all these things. And through the years, we found some amazing stories. It's like loss of a job and I never found another one, or I passed my childbearing years, or my grandmother lived through the Depression and I lived with her and she kept everything. And so I'm being disrespectful. So those emotions, they will come up. And your ability to solve the problem is going to be willing to be determined by whether you are willing to go through the emotion. You have to go through it. And most people cannot do that alone. One of the things that we have found that made such a difference in our boot camps is the community of seeing, oh, I'm not the only one. There's so much shame around this clutter. We think that we're the only ones struggling with it. And you have no idea when you see people in public what their office looks like in the background.
That's right. That's right. You reminded me of another story. Let me share this real quick before we wrap up. We have a client now that we've been working with for quite a while, and she's made tremendous progress, but she has been beating herself up for decades, really, thinking that she isn't good enough and she should be able to do all the things required of her for her business, and she's just not. And she had a breakthrough this past week, and because we've been working with our SOAR system, and we have something called the SOAR board, which is where you put those actions and references and basically organize your life and your business in one place. So I've been working with her on that, and she realized, she said, wow, I now see that I'm over ambitious on what I can accomplish in a day. And I'm over ambitious in what I can accomplish at all, because she was used to making lists, to-do lists. How many of you guys do that? You've got these long to-do lists, and you keep adding to them, or you lose the list and then you start a new list, and you never actually feel a sense of accomplishment. And with our system, we help you really look at it by the day, making the decisions about what you can accomplish each individual day, and putting, if something makes it to your to-do list, it needs to make it to the next question is when. So the first question is, what do I need to do? And the next question is, when will you do it? Even if you don't do it that day, you have the intention and you can move it to somewhere else. And she said that it's easy to move it in our system. She likes that. But she said it's just been an eye opener to realize that she was asking so much of herself, and she was beating herself up because she couldn't do it. And I was like, nobody could do all of this alone. Nobody, with the reality of what she's supposed to be doing, nobody alone could do that. And so she made a big step, and she has asked a family member to help her. And that was something she wasn't able or willing to do months ago, and she made that step. So I want to just encourage everybody listening, take these baby steps, take the baby steps, and you don't have to do it alone. That is exactly what we do, and our team of certified productive environment specialists do. So with that said, and Barbara, I will give you the last word after I share this.
Well,
go ahead. I was just going
to say, the one thing we want you to say is, what's the worst possible thing that would happen if I didn't have this? Yep. Or what's the worst possible thing that if I didn't have to do this? And go do what we call a fast sort. Do some stuff you can do quickly, and then you'll feel encouraged and you'll keep going.
That's right. Was that your last word? Because I was going to give you that after this. So we'll just swap it. Okay. So do something. Do that first sort. Get that pile, pull it together, and file, act, toss, and then reach out to us. And you can first of all, reach out to us by completing your productive environment scorecard. You'll get your productive environment score. You will get a short series of emails that will help you increase your score. And then you will be in touch with us. You'll be able to connect with us and say, raise your hand and say, I would like some help with this. We have an entire team of people that can help you. We have a free group, a free membership program that you can join and connect with people there as well. So there's lots of ways that you can get help. So productiveenvironmentscore.com. Go there and we will see you on the next Productive Environment podcast. Last thing I will say, make sure you like this video, please, especially if you're watching it on YouTube. Share this video with someone else that needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.